The oldest girl fell first. 14 years old, carrying a 3-year-old on her back through waist-deep snow. 8 children followed her trail of blood to a stranger's door. The blacksmith hadn't spoken to another soul in 7 years. Tonight, he'd have to speak for 9. "Please, mister." Her voice cracked. "He killed our parents. He's coming for us." Behind them, torchlight flickered through the blizzard. 2 miles out, maybe less. Silas McAllister looked at 9 frozen faces and made the only choice a decent man could make. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels.
Chator.
The knock came at midnight. 3 weak taps against oak. Then nothing. Silas McAllister set down his hammer and listened. The forge coals glowed red behind him, throwing shadows across the cabin walls. Wind howled through gaps in the timber like something dying. He hadn't heard a knock on that door in 4 years. Hadn't wanted to. The knock came again. Weaker. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the door open. The girl collapsed across his threshold. She was maybe 14, tall for her age, but thin as fence wire. Snow caked her hair white. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and through the fabric he saw marks. Belt marks. Fresh ones layered over old ones, crisscrossed like someone had been practicing. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, arranged in the snow like a ragged army, stood 8 more children. The oldest boy was maybe 12, holding a small girl on his hip. A cluster of others huddled together, their breath pluming white in the freezing air. The smallest, a toddler wrapped in what looked like a flour sack, whimpered against a young girl's chest. 9 children, in a blizzard. At 20 below zero. The oldest girl grabbed his boot with fingers that had gone past blue into something worse. "Please, mister." Her voice came out raw. "He killed our parents. He's coming for us." Silas looked past them, into the darkness. A mile out, maybe less, torchlight bobbed through the trees. Moving fast. "Inside," he said. "All of you. Now." They came through the door like refugees from a war. The oldest boy, 12, with his father's stubborn jaw, carried a 6-year-old who'd stopped shivering, which was bad. A girl of about 11 guided 2 smaller ones by their hands, her face set in the kind of calm that only came from being terrified too long to show it anymore. Silas counted as they passed. 14-year-old girl, 12-year-old boy, 11, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 9 children, 6 girls, 3 boys. The toddler in the flour sack started crying thin and weak. "Shut the door," the oldest girl said. She'd pulled herself up off the floor, standing now, with her hand braced against the wall. "He'll see the light." Silas kicked the door closed. The bar dropped into place with a solid thunk. "The fire," she said. "He'll see the smoke." "Can't put out the fire. You'll freeze." "We've been freezing for 3 days." She looked at him with eyes too old for 14. "We can freeze a little longer if it means he doesn't find us." The 12-year-old boy stepped forward. "Emmy, let me handle this." "Sam, sit down before you fall down." "I ain't gonna sit while some stranger—" "He's not a stranger. He's Silas McAllister." Emmy turned back to Silas. "You pulled our daddy out of the Bannock mine collapse, summer of '79. Carried him 5 miles with a broken leg when the rescue team couldn't get through." Silas remembered. A man trapped under timber screaming. Floodwater rising. He'd done what anyone would have done. "Your daddy was William Holloway." "Yes, sir, and my mama was Sarah." Emmy's voice cracked on the name. "They're dead now. Wagon accident in September. Wheel came off on flat ground where wheels don't come off." The torchlight outside was closer now. Half a mile. "Who's coming?" Silas asked. "Our uncle." Sam spat the word like poison. Cornelius Blackwood. He showed up 2 weeks after the funeral with papers saying he was our legal guardian, moved into our house, started selling off the livestock. The boy's hands clenched. Started using his belt on anyone who talked back. He wants our land, Emmy said quietly. Both homesteads, ours and the Pattersons. She gestured to 4 of the younger children who huddled together near the stove. Their parents died in the same accident. Same wagon. Cornelius says he's guardian to all of us now. Silas looked at the Patterson children. The oldest was a girl of 11 with calculating eyes. Charlotte, he'd learn later. She held a 7-year-old boy who hadn't spoken since watching his mother die, Jake. A 5-year-old girl with incongruent sunshine in her smile, Rosie. And the toddler in the flour sack, 3 years old, and too quiet, Ruth. Both families in one accident, Silas said slowly. Same accident, same day, same stretch of road. Emmy met his eyes. Our daddy was careful, Mr. McAllister. He checked that wagon every Sunday after church, checked it the morning they left. The torchlight split into two riders now. You're saying your uncle killed them. I'm saying the wheel bolts were filed. I'm saying Cornelius had papers ready 2 weeks later. I'm saying he hits the little ones when they cry and locks us in the root cellar when we don't work fast enough. Emmy's voice didn't waver. I'm saying if you send us back to him, we'll die. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not next week. But we'll die. The 3-year-old Ruth started crying louder. The sound was wrong. Too weak. A baby that age should be able to scream the roof down. How long since she ate? Silas asked. 2 days. Cornelius said we didn't earn supper. Sam's jaw worked. Said Ruth was too young to be useful anyway. Something cold settled in Silas's chest, a feeling he hadn't had since the war. You, he said to Emmy, take the young ones to the back room. There's blankets on the bed. Pile them together for warmth. The riders? I'll handle the riders. Emmy hesitated. Every instinct in her body was screaming to protect her siblings, to stay between them and any threat. Silas recognized that look. He'd worn it himself once. You pulled my daddy from that mine, she said finally. He talked about you every year on the anniversary. Said you were the only man he'd trust with his life. Then trust me with yours. She nodded once sharp. Charlotte Grace helped me with the little ones. Sam stay with Mr. McAllister. I don't need Sam. The younger boy fell silent. Emmy gathered the smaller children with the efficiency of someone who'd been mothering since before she should have had to, and disappeared into the back room. Sam stayed. His fists were still clenched. You any good in a fight? Silas asked. Good enough. You ever killed a man? Sam went pale. No, sir. Then stay behind me and don't do anything stupid. Silas pulled his rifle from above the mantel, checked the chamber, loaded. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. Silas McAllister. The voice carried smooth over the wind, cultured, the kind of voice that practiced sounding reasonable. Silas opened the door and stepped onto the porch, pulling it closed behind him. The cold hit like a fist. 2 riders sat their horses in the snow. The first was a thin man in a black duster, his face narrow and calculating. Even in torchlight, Silas could see the silver belt buckle at his waist, a bull's head with curved horns. The second rider wore a star. Sheriff Cole, Silas said. Bit late for a social call. Henry Cole looked uncomfortable. His horse shifted under him. Silas, Mr. Blackwood here says his wards ran off. 9 children. Says they might have come this way. They're inside, Silas said. Cornelius Blackwood smiled. Up close, he had the look of a man who counted things. Land parcels, timber board feet, the exact worth of other people's pain. I'm relieved to hear it. I've been half mad with worry. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. I have guardianship papers right here. Legal and proper, signed by Judge Whitmore himself. I'm sure you understand a man in my position, widower, no children of my own, taking on 9 orphans is quite the burden. but family is family. "Show me the papers," Sheriff Cole said. Blackwood handed them over. Cole read by torchlight, his lips moving slightly. "Looks legitimate," Cole said slowly. "Silas, I'm sorry, but if the papers are legal, let me see the children first." Silas didn't move from the doorway. "Let me hear them say they want to go back." Blackwood's smile thinned. "They're children. They don't know what they want. They've been coddled, spoiled by parents who didn't understand that discipline builds character." He gestured at the cabin. "I'm sure they've told you stories. Children do that when they don't want to face consequences." "The oldest girl says you killed her parents." Sheriff Cole's head snapped up. "What? That's absurd." Blackwood's voice stayed smooth, but something flickered behind his eyes. "A tragic accident, nothing more. The grief has affected their judgment." "She says the wheel bolts were filed." Silence. The wind howled between them. "I investigated that accident," Cole said carefully. "Found nothing suspicious." "Did you check the bolts?" Cole hesitated. That hesitation said everything. "The children are traumatized," Blackwood said harder now. "They need stability, structure, a firm hand, not some—" His gaze swept over Silas's cabin, the forge, the isolation. "Some hermit who hasn't spoken to the town in years." "I've spoken when I had something to say." "And what do you have to say now that you're keeping my wards against their will, against the law?" Blackwood leaned forward in his saddle. "That's kidnapping Mr. McAllister, a hanging offense in this territory." The door behind Silas opened. He didn't turn, but he heard Emmy's voice sharp and clear. "I'd rather hang than go back to him." She stepped onto the porch beside Silas. In the torchlight, the bruises on her face stood out stark purple, fading to yellow down her jaw, one eye still swollen enough to affect her vision. Sheriff Cole sucked in a breath. "Dear God." "Discipline," Blackwood said flatly. "She was caught stealing food." "I was feeding Ruth. She hadn't eaten in 2 days because you said babies don't earn their keep." "Children exaggerate." "Then explain these." Emmy turned her back and pulled down the collar of her dress. Even in the dim light, the marks were clear. Belt marks, yes, but also something else. The outline of a buckle stamped into her skin, a bull's head with horns. Silas looked at Blackwood's belt, at the silver buckle gleaming at his waist. "That's the pattern," Emmy said. "Plain as day. You want me to show you the same marks on Abby? She's 6. You want to see what he did to a 6-year-old for crying?" "She's lying," Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "Or confused. Grief does strange things to—" "Cornelius." Sheriff Cole's voice was quiet. "I've known you 6 months. I've known the Holloway family for 15 years. William and Sarah were good people. I'm not saying they weren't. I'm saying I'd like to see those children, all 9 of them, now." Blackwood's hand moved toward his coat. Silas raised his rifle. "Don't." The moment stretched. Torchlight flickered. Somewhere behind Silas inside the cabin, a child was crying. "Sheriff?" Blackwood's voice was ice. "You're going to let this man threaten me. I'm going to let this man protect 9 children while I figure out what's true." Cole dismounted slowly. "You'll come to my office tomorrow, Cornelius. Bring your papers. We'll sort this out proper." "The papers are legal. I have rights. And those children have bruises that match your belt buckle." Cole stepped toward the porch. "Emmy, go inside. Keep your brothers and sisters warm. I'll make sure Mr. Blackwood leaves peacefully." Emmy didn't move. "He'll come back. He always comes back." "Not tonight." Cole turned to Blackwood. "Tomorrow. My office. Noon." Blackwood sat rigid in his saddle. The mask of civility had cracked, and underneath was something cold, something patient. 10 days, he said softly. "What?" Territorial law gives a guardian 10 days to recover runaway wards before property rights transfer. His eyes fixed on Silas. You have 10 days to return my nieces and nephews. After that, their inheritance, both homesteads, all 280 acres, reverts to me as conservator. He smiled. And you, Mr. McAllister, will face charges of kidnapping, custodial interference, and harboring fugitives. The penalty is 5 years in prison and forfeiture of all property. He gathered his reins. Enjoy your evening with them. It won't last. He wheeled his horse and rode into the darkness. Sheriff Cole watched him go. His shoulders sagged. Silas, I'm sorry. The papers look legal, until I can prove otherwise. You believe her? Cole looked at Emmy, at the bruises on her face, at the way she stood ready to throw herself between danger and the cabin door. I believe something's wrong, but believing isn't proof. He mounted his horse. 10 days. Use them. He rode away, following Blackwood's trail. Emmy stayed on the porch until the torchlight disappeared completely. He won't wait 10 days, she said. He'll come back with more men, with guns. Maybe. You should send us away. There's a missionary school in Helena. They take orphans. Silas looked at her. 14 years old, carrying 8 younger children through a blizzard to a stranger's door because she had nowhere else to go. When I pulled your daddy from that mine, he said, he told me something. Said if anything ever happened to him and Sarah, there was only one man in Montana he'd trust with his children. Emmy's breath caught. He wrote it in his will, filed it with the church. Silas didn't know if that was true, but he'd find out tomorrow. Your daddy didn't want Cornelius anywhere near you. That's why Cornelius had to move so fast. You're saying, I'm saying you didn't come to a stranger's door tonight. Your daddy sent you here. He opened the cabin door. Now get inside before you freeze. We've got 9 mouths to feed and 10 days to figure out how to keep you alive. Emmy stood frozen. For the first time since she'd collapsed on his porch, she looked like a child instead of a soldier. Why? She whispered. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Why would you risk everything for? Because your daddy saved my life once. In the mine, you saved him. Different time. Silas didn't elaborate. Some debts couldn't be explained in words. Inside, now, she went. The back room was chaos. 9 children ranging from 14 to 3 crowded onto a bed built for one. The toddler Ruth had stopped crying, which meant she was either asleep or too exhausted to make sound. The 6-year-old Abby was sobbing quietly into Emmy's pillow. Sam stood guard by the window, though there was nothing to see but darkness. He's gone, he asked. For now. He'll be back. I know. The 11-year-old Charlotte, he remembered, was systematically checking the younger children. She'd taken off Ruth's flour sack wrapping and was examining the toddler's fingers and toes for frostbite. 2 of Ruth's toes are bad, she reported without looking up. Black at the tips. Rosie's fingers are okay, just numb. Jake won't let me check him. The 7-year-old boy Jake sat in the corner, his knees drawn up to his chest. He hadn't made a sound since entering the cabin. He doesn't talk, Charlotte said quietly. Not since the accident. Not one word. Silas knelt down to Jake's level. The boy flinched, but didn't run. Jake, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to keep you safe. He kept his voice low, steady. Can you show me your hands? Jake looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Slowly, he extended his hands. The fingertips were pale, but not black. He'd make it. Good boy. Silas stood. Charlotte, you have medical experience. My mama was the closest thing to a doctor in Pine Ridge. I helped her. Charlotte's voice was flat. Before. I need you to check everyone. Fingers, toes, ears. Anyone with black skin, tell me immediately. She nodded and went to work. Emmy appeared in the doorway. They're asking for food. Kitchen's through there. Beans, bacon, bread. Coffee on the stove. Is there enough? Silas looked at 9 hungry faces. He'd been planning to ride into town for supplies next week. There's enough for tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Emmy hesitated. Mr. McAllister. Silas. Silas. She swallowed. Thank you. For believing us. Most people don't. Most people haven't seen the marks on a 6-year-old's back. Her face tightened. Abby got it worst. She cries and crying made Cornelius angry. He said he was teaching her to be strong. Only cowards beat children. That's what my daddy used to say. Emmy's eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. He used to say real strength is knowing you can hurt someone and choosing not to. Your daddy was a wise man. He was the best man I ever knew. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Until tonight. She disappeared into the kitchen. Silas stood in the doorway between the 2 rooms, watching 9 children slowly unclench. The little ones were starting to talk again, their voices hushed but present. Sam had finally sat down, his guard dog posture relaxing by degrees. Even Jake in his corner was watching the activity with something other than fear. 3 days ago, they'd been prisoners in their own home. 2 hours ago, they'd been fleeing through a blizzard. Now they were here, safe at least for the moment. 10 days. He had 10 days to find proof that Cornelius Blackwood had murdered their parents. 10 days to find a legal standing that would let him keep these children. 10 days before the law turned against them all. Silas looked at the forge coals still glowing in the main room. At the horseshoe he'd been shaping when the knock came. Unfinished business. Good things can't be rushed, he thought. But they're worth fighting for. He rolled up his sleeves and went to help Emmy with the beans. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. 2. The children slept in piles, too exhausted to care about crowding. Emmy had tried to stay awake standing guard, but Silas had ordered her to bed and she'd dropped like a stone. He sat by the window rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. The snow had stopped falling. The wind had died. In the stillness he could hear the children breathing, 9 small bodies rising and falling in sleep. He hadn't heard that sound in 7 years. Martha's breathing had been loud near the end, labored with the effort of bringing their daughter into the world. He'd held her hand while the doctor worked, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. The baby had come out blue and silent. Martha had lasted 3 hours longer. He'd buried them together in the spring when the ground finally thawed. Hadn't attended church since. Hadn't spoken to neighbors unless necessary. Had built his world small and quiet, safe from any more loss. Now 9 children were sleeping in his cabin, and a man with murder in his heart had 10 days to take them away. Silas looked at his hands. Big, scarred, calloused. Hands that had pulled a man from a collapsing mine. Hands that had failed to save his wife and child. Could they save these 9? He didn't know, but he was going to try. The first thin light of dawn crept through the window when he heard movement. Not from the bedroom, from outside. Hoofbeats still distant, but coming closer. Silas was on his feet before the sound registered fully. He checked the rifle, moved to the door, listened. 1 horse, moving fast. He eased the door open. A rider came into view through the trees. Small, riding hard, dressed in a man's coat that was too big for her. As she got closer, Silas recognized her. Clara Whitfield, the widow who ran the general store in town. She reined up hard in front of the cabin, her horse blowing clouds of steam. Mr. McAllister. She was breathing almost as hard as the horse. The children, are they here? Inside. Thank God. She dismounted in a rush. I came as soon as I heard. Reverend Stone sent word last night. She stopped, seeing something in his face. What happened? Blackwood was here, with the sheriff. And Cole gave me 10 days. After that, the children go back or I go to prison. Clara's face hardened. That man killed my husband. Silas went still. What? 3 years ago. Mine accident. They called it an accident. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. But I found the same thing Emmy's talking about. equipment that had been tampered with. Cornelius Blackwood bought Marcus's claim 2 weeks after the funeral. Same pattern, same timing. You have proof. Nothing that would hold up in court. Cornelius is careful. She pulled a bundle from her saddlebag. But I brought supplies. Food for the children, bandages, medicine. You rode through the night to bring supplies. I rode through the night because those children deserve someone fighting for them. Clara met his eyes. And because when my husband died, the whole town looked the other way. I won't do that to another family. From inside, Silas heard Emmy's voice, sharp with alarm. Mr. McAllister. It's all right, he called. A friend. Emmy appeared in the doorway, a kitchen knife in her hand. She was ready to fight, ready to protect her family even against impossible odds. Clara Whitfield looked at the girl 14 years old, bruised, armed, unbroken, and something in her face shifted. Well, Clara said softly, aren't you exactly what I would have been at your age? Who are you? Someone who knows what Cornelius Blackwood really is. Clara stepped onto the porch. And someone who's been waiting 3 years to see him pay for it. Emmy lowered the knife slowly. You believe us. Sweetheart, I more than believe you. I've been gathering evidence since the day my husband died. Clara pulled a leather folder from inside her coat. And I think it's finally time to use it. Silas looked at the folder, at Clara's determined face, at Emmy's desperate hope. 9 children, 10 days, 1 chance. The sun broke over the mountains, painting the snow gold. Come inside, Silas said. We've got work to do. The folder contained 3 years of patience. Clara spread the documents across Silas's kitchen table while the children ate. 9 bowls of beans and bacon, 9 cups of warm milk she'd brought from town. The little ones ate like they'd forgotten food existed. Ruth, the 3-year-old, had to be fed by hand. She'd forgotten how to hold a spoon. This is everything I've collected since Marcus died. Clara tapped a stack of papers. Land transfers, death certificates, witness statements from people who later left town or went silent. Silas studied the documents. 5 families, 5 accidents, 5 properties that ended up in Cornelius Blackwood's hands within weeks of each death. The McCready Ranch, barn fire, 1879. Henry McCready died trying to save his horses. Clara's voice was flat. His widow sold the land to Cornelius for 1/3 of its value because she couldn't afford to rebuild. The Chen homestead, Rockslide, 1880. Killed both parents, left 2 children. Cornelius took guardianship, sent the children to an orphanage in California, kept the land. The Whitfield claim, my husband's mine. Cave-in, 1881. Equipment failure. She paused. Marcus was the most careful man I ever knew. He checked those support beams every morning. Emmy had stopped eating. She was listening. And the Holloway and Patterson families, Clara finished. Wagon accident, September 1884. Wheel came off on flat ground. That's 5 families, Silas said, all on properties along the same stretch of land. The Northern Pacific Rail Survey line. Clara pulled out a map, hand-drawn but detailed. Every single property sits on the proposed right-of-way. The railroad's been buying easements for 2 years now, paying good money, $8,000–10,000 for the right to lay track across a man's land. Emmy stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. That's why he wanted us dead, not just the land, the railroad money. Combined your family's homestead and the Patterson claim cover 1,280 acres of prime root. Clara looked at the girl. Worth maybe $20,000 to the right buyer. More if he controls the timber rights. Sam slammed his fist on the table. The younger children flinched. He murdered our parents for money. Sam's voice shook. And the law's just gonna let him take us back. The law doesn't know what we know. Silas picked up one of the documents, a death certificate for Henry McCready. But we're going to tell them. Who's going to listen? Emmy asked. Sheriff Cole saw my bruises last night and still said the papers looked legal. Sheriff Cole is a good man in a bad position. Clara gathered the documents carefully. But there's someone else. Someone Cornelius can't buy or intimidate. Who? Reverend Elijah Stone. Clara tucked the folder back into her coat. He's been keeping records at the church for 40 years. Baptisms, marriages, deaths, and wills. If your father filed anything with the church instead of the county, Reverend Stone would know. Silas remembered what he'd told Emmy last night, that her father had written a will naming him as guardian. He'd said it without knowing if it was true. A gamble based on a dying man's words in a flooded mineshaft. Time to find out if that gamble would pay off. "I'll ride to town," he said. "Talk to the Reverend." "I'm coming with you." Emmy's chin lifted. "He's my father's will. I should be there." "Too dangerous. Blackwood's men will be watching." "Then let them watch. I'm not hiding in a cabin while other people fight for my family." Charlotte spoke up from the corner where she'd been checking Ruth's toes. "Emmy's right. If there's a will, she should be the one to claim it. She's the oldest Holloway." "And I should go too," Sam added. "Someone needs to protect her." "You're 12. I'm old enough to swing a hammer. Old enough to shoot if I have to." Silas looked at this boy. 12 years old, trying to be a man because someone had to be. He'd been the same age when his own father died. "You stay here. Protect the young ones." "But that's not a request." Silas's voice left no room for argument. "Charlotte, you're in charge of medical. Grace, you help her. Tommy, keep the little ones calm. Jake—" He paused, looking at the silent boy in the corner. "Jake, you watch the windows. You see anyone coming, you find Charlotte immediately." Jake nodded once. First response he'd given since arriving. "What about me?" The voice came from Abby, the 6-year-old. She'd stopped eating, her eyes wide and frightened. "What do I do?" Silas knelt down to her level. Up close, he could see the fear that lived behind her eyes. The kind of fear that came from being hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you. "You have the most important job of all," he said gently. "You take care of Rosie and Ruth. They need someone brave to look after them. Can you do that?" Abby's lower lip trembled. "I'm not brave. I cry too much. Uncle Cornelius said—" "Your uncle was wrong about a lot of things." Silas put his hand on her shoulder, light enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "Crying doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you feel things. That's a gift, not a weakness." "Really? Really? The bravest people I ever knew cried plenty. They just didn't let it stop them from doing what needed doing." Abby wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Okay, I'll take care of the babies." "That's my girl." He stood. Emmy was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just, my daddy used to talk to us like that, like we mattered." "You do matter." "Not to most people." "Then most people are fools." Silas pulled on his coat. "Clara, you're with me and Emmy. We'll take the back trail, come into town from the north, less likely to be seen. And if we are seen, then we deal with it." Clara smiled grimly. "I've been waiting 3 years to deal with Cornelius Blackwood." "You might get your chance." Silas checked his rifle one more time. "Sam, bar the door behind us. Don't open it for anyone except me, Clara, or Reverend Stone. Anyone else comes, you take the children out the back and head for the creek. Follow it north until you hit the Miller farm. Tell them I sent you." Sam straightened. "Yes, sir." "Good man." They left as the sun climbed higher, 3 figures on horseback, cutting through snow that glittered like broken glass. Behind them, Sam dropped the bar into place and turned to face 8 frightened faces. "You heard him," Sam said. "We've got a job to do." The ride to town took 2 hours. They kept to the tree line, avoiding the main road where Blackwood's men might be watching. Clara knew the back trails. She'd been using them for 3 years to move around without being seen. "Cornelius has eyes everywhere," she said as they rode. The telegraph operator, the hotel clerk, 2 of the deputies. Anyone who owes him money or wants to stay on his good side. "That's half the town," Emmy said. "More than half. When a man controls the land, he controls the people on it. Most folks in Pine Ridge rent from Cornelius, or work for someone who does." "Then why do you stay?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Because my husband is buried here. Because running would mean letting Cornelius win." She glanced at Emmy. "And because I keep hoping someone else will show up who's angry enough to fight." They approached Pine Ridge from the north through a stand of pines that bordered the church property. The steeple rose against the gray sky, simple and plain. "Wait here," Silas said. "I'll check if it's clear." He dismounted and moved through the trees on foot. The church sat alone at the edge of town, separated from the main street by a small cemetery. Reverend Stone's cottage was attached to the back, smoke rising from its chimney. No horses tied outside. No movement in the windows. Silas whistled 2 short notes, 1 long. The signal he'd used in the war. Clara and Emmy emerged from the trees leading their horses. They tied the animals behind the cottage out of sight, and Silas knocked on the back door. It opened immediately. Reverend Elijah Stone was 70 if he was a day, but his eyes were sharp and his handshake was firm. He looked at Emmy, then at Silas, then at Clara. "I've been expecting you." He stepped back to let them in. "The whole town's been talking since last night. Cornelius is saying you kidnapped his wards." "They came to me," Silas said, "beaten half to death running through a blizzard." "I know. I heard." Stone led them into a small sitting room lined with books. A fire crackled in the hearth. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Emmy remained standing. "My father. Did he file a will with you?" Stone studied her for a long moment. "You have your father's directness. He used to come straight to the point, too." "Did he file a will?" "Yes." The word hung in the air. 2 years ago." Stone continued. "He came to me after church one Sunday. Said he'd been worried about his brother. Said Cornelius had been asking questions about the property, about what would happen if anything happened to him and Sarah." "What kind of questions?" "The kind a man asks when he's planning something." Stone moved to a cabinet in the corner, unlocked it with a key from his pocket. William was scared, but he was also smart. He didn't trust the county clerk said there were rumors about records being altered, documents disappearing. So he filed his will with the church instead. He pulled out a folded document, old and creased, but intact. Last will and testament of William Holloway, dated March 1882. Stone handed it to Emmy. "Would you like to read it?" Emmy's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her eyes moved across the words, and Silas watched her face change disbelief, then hope, then something fiercer. "It names you." She looked up at Silas. "My father named you as guardian, you and Clara Whitfield as alternates." "What?" Clara stepped forward. "Marcus and we were barely acquainted with the Holloways." "You were acquainted enough." Stone's voice was soft. "William respected your husband. Said Marcus was the only man in town who stood up to Cornelius when he tried to buy out the smaller claims. After Marcus died, William added your name to the will. Said if anything happened to him, his children would need a woman's influence." Clara's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "I didn't know." William didn't want Cornelius to know. He was afraid of what his brother might do if he found out. Stone took the will back, handling it carefully. "This document supersedes any guardianship claim Cornelius filed. It was written 2 years before the accident, properly witnessed, properly sealed." "Then the children are safe," Emmy breathed. "Cornelius can't take them." "Not legally, but the law moves slowly, and Cornelius moves fast." Stone looked at Silas. "You have 10 days before the territorial deadline. We need to get this will to Sheriff Cole and make sure it's registered with the county before Cornelius can challenge it." He'll claim it's a forgery, Clara said. He can claim whatever he likes. I witnessed it myself alongside Marcus Whitfield and Judge Peterson. God rest them both. Stone's jaw tightened. Cornelius has killed 3 of the 4 witnesses to this will. I'm the only one left. The room went cold. You're saying he'll come for you, Silas said. I'm saying he already has. Twice in the past year, men have tried to break into my records room. Twice I found evidence of someone searching through my files. Stone moved to the window looking out at the churchyard. I've moved the will 3 times, kept it in different hiding places. Cornelius knows it exists, he just doesn't know where. How do you know he knows? Because he came to me himself, 6 months ago. Offered me $500 to review the Holloway records, said he wanted to make sure everything was in order for his wards. You refused. I threw him out of my church. Stone's voice hardened. That man is a murderer, and everyone in this town knows it. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Emmy had gone pale. If he knows the will exists, he'll destroy it. He'll burn this church down if he has to. That's why we're not leaving it here. Stone handed the document to Silas. Take it. Register it with Sheriff Cole today in front of witnesses. Make sure it becomes public record before Cornelius can make it disappear. Silas took the will, The paper felt impossibly light for something that held 9 lives in its words. Once this is registered, he said slowly, what happens? Legally, Cornelius loses his guardianship claim. The children become your responsibility, and their parents' estates passed to them with you as executor. Stone paused. But that won't stop him. He'll fight it in court. He'll claim fraud, forgery, anything to delay the process. And while he fights, those children are still in danger. Then we need more than a will. Clara stepped forward. We need to prove what he did. The murders, the land theft, all of it. Can you prove it? Clara pulled out her folder. I've got 3 years of evidence. Documentation of every accident. Statements from witnesses who were paid to stay quiet. Financial records showing Cornelius's land purchases matched perfectly with each death. Stone examined the documents, his face growing graver with each page. This is substantial, he said finally. But it's not proof, it's pattern. Pattern is enough for a grand jury. Not in this territory. Not when Cornelius has Judge Whitmore in his pocket. Stone set down the papers. You need a confession, or physical evidence. Something that ties him directly to at least one of the murders. The wagon bolt. Emmy's voice was steady. Sheriff Cole found it at the accident site. Said the threads were filed, not worn. If we can match the tool marks to Cornelius's equipment. Cornelius carries surveyor's tools, Clara said. The kind with unique threading patterns. If we could get our hands on them, you'd need a warrant. Stone shook his head. And Judge Whitmore won't issue one against his biggest patron. Then we get it another way. Silas folded the will carefully and tucked it inside his coat. We go to the territorial marshal, over Whitmore's head. That's 3 days' ride to the capital, maybe 4 in this weather. Then I leave today. You can't. Emmy grabbed his arm. The children need you. I need you. If you leave, if I stay, we lose. Silas looked at her at the fear and determination warring in her face. Cornelius has the local law. He has the judge. He has money and men and time. The only way we win is by bringing in authority he can't buy. But 10 days? I can make it to the capital and back in 8 if I push hard. That leaves 2 days margin. He turned to Clara. You stay with the children. You and Reverend Stone both. Between you and Sam, you can keep them safe until I return. And if you don't return, the question hung in the air. Then you take this will and you run. Silas pulled it back out, pressed it into Emmy's hands. Helena, Bozeman, California. Anywhere Cornelius can't reach. You start over. You raise your brothers and sisters. You live. Emmy's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to start over. I want my family. I want to stay. I know. and I'm going to fight like hell to make that happen." He put his hand on her shoulder. "But if I fail, you survive. That's not giving up, that's being smart. Your parents didn't die so you could die too. They died so you could live." She broke then. The 14-year-old soldier crumbled, and underneath was just a girl who'd lost everything and was terrified of losing more. Silas held her while she cried. Over her head, he met Clara's eyes. "Watch over them," he said, "with my life." Reverend Stone cleared his throat. "Before you go, there's one more thing you should know." Silas released Emmy gently. "What?" "Cornelius has been sending telegrams to the Capitol all week. I don't know what they say the operator is loyal to him, but he's been in that office every morning." Stone's face was troubled. "If he's communicating with the territorial government, he could be setting a trap. Or building a case against you. Kidnapping charges filed in advance. A warrant waiting when you arrive." Silas absorbed this. The path forward was narrowing options falling away like leaves in autumn. "Then I don't go to the government offices. I go to the territorial marshal directly. I know a man in Helena we served together in the war. He won't care about warrants or politics. He'll care about the truth." "You're gambling everything on one man's integrity." "I'm gambling everything on the only chance we've got." Silas pulled on his coat. "Clara, get word to Sheriff Cole. Tell him about the will. Make sure he sees it, witnesses it, records it in his own files. Even if Cornelius buys the county clerk, Cole's records will stand. And if Cole won't help, he will. He's a good man who's been looking the other way because looking forward was too hard. Give him a reason to look forward." Silas moved to the door, then stopped. Emmy had composed herself. She stood straight, the will clutched against her chest, her face wet but determined. "When you come back," she said, "we'll be here, all of us, alive. I'm counting on it." He walked out into the cold. The ride back to the cabin was faster alone. Silas pushed his horse hard, eating up the miles, running through plans and contingencies in his mind. If the territorial marshal listened, if he could get there and back in time, if Clara and Stone could protect the children, if. Too many ifs. But there was no other way. He was half a mile from the cabin when he saw the smoke, not chimney smoke. Too much, too black. He kicked his horse into a gallop, heart pounding against his ribs. The cabin came into view through the trees. The barn was on fire. Silas leaped from his horse before it fully stopped running toward the cabin. The door hung open. The bar splintered. Inside, Sam lay crumpled against the far wall, blood running from a gash on his forehead. Charlotte knelt over him, pressing a cloth to the wound. The younger children huddled in the corner. Ruth screaming, Abby sobbing, Tommy trying to hold them both. "What happened?" Silas dropped to his knees beside Sam. "Men came." Charlotte's voice was shaking but controlled. "3 of them. They didn't announce themselves, just kicked in the door. Sam tried to fight. They hit him with a rifle butt. The others, they took Grace and Jake." Charlotte's composure cracked. "They said to tell you they want to make a trade. The children for the will." Silas's blood went cold. "Who said?" "The leader. He had a message from Mr. Blackwood." Charlotte swallowed. "He said if you don't bring the will to the old mine by sundown tomorrow, you'll never see Grace and Jake again." Outside, the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks. Inside, Silas looked at 5 terrified children and made a decision. The will could save all 9. Or he could save 2 now and lose everything. His hands curled into fists. Cornelius Blackwood had made the first move. Time to make the last one. Sam's eyes fluttered open. Blood still seeped through the cloth Charlotte pressed against his forehead, but his gaze was focused. Angry. "I tried to stop them." His voice came out raw. "I swung at the first one through the door, got him good in the jaw, but then, you did what you could." Silas checked the wound. Deep, but not dangerous. The boy would have a scar, but he'd live. How many men? 3. Maybe 4. They came fast, didn't give us time to run. Sam struggled to sit up. Charlotte pushed him back down. Grace screamed when they grabbed her. Jake didn't make a sound, just went still like he does. Did you recognize any of them? The leader, tall man with a red beard, works at Cornelius's land office. Silas knew him. Hank Dawson, mean drunk, meaner sober, the kind of man who enjoyed hurting people smaller than himself. They said sundown tomorrow. Charlotte's hands were steady on the bandage, but her voice betrayed her fear. At the old Bannock mine. The same mine where Silas had pulled William Holloway from the rubble 5 years ago. Cornelius had a sick sense of poetry. They want the will, Silas said. They want you dead. Sam grabbed Silas's arm. It's a trap. You know it's a trap. You go to that mine, they'll kill you and take the will anyway. Probably. Then don't go. We'll find another way. They have Grace. They have Jake. Silas stood. There is no other way. Tommy stepped forward from the huddle of younger children, 8 years old, trying to be brave. Mr. Silas, is Grace gonna be okay? Silas looked at the boy, at Abby clutching Ruth, both of them crying, at Rosie, who for once wasn't smiling, at Charlotte holding her brother together with nothing but willpower. 5 children here, 2 children there, 9 lives hanging by a thread. I'm going to bring her back, Silas said. Her and Jake both. Promise. The word hit him like a fist. He'd promised Martha he'd keep her safe. Promised their daughter a life she never got to live. Promises were dangerous things. But Tommy was looking at him with eyes that needed to believe in something. I promise. The sound of hoofbeats outside made everyone freeze. Silas grabbed his rifle, moved to the shattered door. Through the smoke from the still-burning barn, he saw 2 riders approaching, Clara Whitfield and Sheriff Cole. They reined up hard, Clara's face going white when she saw the destruction. Cole dismounted before his horse fully stopped, hand on his pistol. What happened here? Blackwood's men. Silas lowered the rifle. They took 2 of the children. Took them where? Old Bannock mine. Sundown tomorrow. They want to trade for the will. Cole's jaw tightened. That's kidnapping. I can arrest... Arrest who? You got 3 deputies, and 2 of them are on Cornelius's payroll. By the time you gather a posse, Grace and Jake will be dead. Then what do you suggest? Silas met his eyes. I suggest you do your job while I do mine. Meaning, you take Clara and these children to the church. Reverend Stone will protect them. Register the will, officially make it part of the public record. Whatever happens to me, that will stands. And you, I go to the mine. Alone against at least 3 armed men. You got a better idea? Cole was silent. They both knew he didn't. Clara dismounted and pushed past both men into the cabin. She knelt beside Sam, checked his wound, then looked at Charlotte. You did good keeping pressure on it. He'll be fine. I know. Charlotte's voice cracked. But Grace, Jake. Silas will get them back. How do you know? Clara looked at Silas, still standing in the doorway with smoke swirling around him. Because he's the kind of man who keeps his promises, even the impossible ones. Silas turned away from her faith in him. He wasn't sure he deserved it. We need to move, he said. Cornelius will send more men when these don't report back. The children can't stay here. The church is defensible, Cole said. Stone's got a root cellar, thick walls. I can station my 1 honest deputy there. Do it. The next hour was controlled chaos. They loaded the children onto horses Sam insisted on riding. Despite his wound, Charlotte kept Ruth bundled against her chest. Tommy held on to Abby, while Rosie clung to Clara's waist. The cabin was lost. The barn a pile of embers, but the children were alive. That was what mattered. At the edge of the property, Emmy appeared on horseback, riding hard from the direction of town. She'd heard about the attack somehow. News traveled fast in Pine Ridge. I came as soon as... She saw the cabin, the barn, Sam's bandaged head. Her face went gray. No, 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 no. Grace and Jake, Charlotte said. They took them. Emmy wheeled her horse toward Silas. Where? Bannock Mine, tomorrow sundown. I'm coming with you. No. They're my brother and sister, my responsibility. I'm coming. You're staying with the others. Silas kept his voice flat. Someone has to lead this family if I don't come back. Don't say that. It's true. You're the oldest. You're the strongest. They need you more than they need me. Emmy's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I can't lose anyone else. I can't. You won't. He reached out, squeezed her shoulder. But if something goes wrong, you keep going. You take these children and you run. You build a new life somewhere Cornelius can't touch. That's not giving up, that's surviving. How can you ask me to? Because your father asked me to protect you. And protecting you means making sure you're alive tomorrow, no matter what. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded just once. Bring them back. I will. The group moved out toward town, a ragged caravan of horses and children, and desperate hope. Silas watched them go until they disappeared into the trees. Then he turned toward the mountains. He had until sundown tomorrow. That gave him roughly 20 hours to plan, prepare, and somehow pull 2 children from the grip of men who wanted him dead. The odds weren't good. But they never had been. The old Bannock mine sat in a hollow between 2 ridges accessible only by a narrow trail that wound through pine forest and shale slides. Silas knew the terrain. He'd worked that mine briefly before turning to blacksmithing, knew its tunnels and shafts, and the way sound echoed off the rock walls. He also knew it was a death trap. One way in, one way out. A man with a rifle could hold that trail against an army, which meant he couldn't use the trail. He spent the ride calculating angles, remembering the layout. There was another way into the mine, an old ventilation shaft on the ridge above, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. He'd used it once during the collapse to reach William Holloway when the main entrance was blocked. If it was still open. If Cornelius didn't know about it. If. But it was the only chance he had. He made camp that night in a hollow 2 miles from the mine. No fire, no light. The cold seeped through his coat into his bones. He thought about Martha, about the baby girl he'd held for 1 hour before she stopped breathing. He'd been helpless then, unable to save them despite everything he'd tried. He wouldn't be helpless now. At first light, he climbed the ridge. The snow was deep here, untouched by human passage. His breath came in white clouds as he struggled upward, boots slipping on loose shale hidden beneath the powder. The ventilation shaft was where he remembered it, a dark opening in the rock face partially blocked by a fallen pine. He spent an hour moving the debris, working quietly, listening for any sound from below. Nothing. Either they hadn't posted guards this far up, or they were confident no one knew about this entrance. Silas squeezed into the shaft. The darkness was absolute. He moved by memory and touch, one hand on the rough stone wall, the other clutching his rifle. The shaft angled downward, twisting twice before opening into a larger passage. He could hear voices now, distant, echoing. He crept forward. The passage opened onto a ledge overlooking the main chamber. Below, lantern light flickered off wet stone walls. And there, tied to support beams near the old ore cart tracks, sat Grace and Jake. Grace's face was streaked with tears, but she was conscious, alert. Her wrists were bound in front of her, and a gag covered her mouth. Jake sat beside her, eerily still, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. 3 men stood guard. Hank Dawson and 2 others Silas didn't recognize. They had rifles, pistols, the easy posture of men who didn't expect trouble. But Cornelius wasn't there. That worried Silas more than anything. Cornelius was careful, meticulous. If he wasn't here overseeing the exchange himself, it meant something else was happening. Something Silas couldn't see. The sun outside was climbing. Maybe 4 hours until sundown. He needed a plan. Silas pulled back from the ledge and found a sheltered spot to think. 3 armed men against 1. No element of surprise if he used the main entrance. But from up here, from the ledge, he could take 1, maybe 2 before they knew what was happening. But the 3rd would have time to reach the children, use them as shields, or worse. He needed a distraction. The old dynamite storage room. It was somewhere in these tunnels left over from the mining days, if there was anything still there after 5 years. He moved deeper into the darkness, feeling his way along walls that grew damper as he descended. The mine had been abandoned after the collapse, too dangerous, too expensive to shore up. Nobody had cleaned it out properly. The storage room was exactly where he remembered. And inside, covered in dust but intact, sat 2 cases of blasting sticks. Old dynamite was unstable. Dangerous. Could go off from a hard look. Perfect. Silas worked quickly, hands steady despite the risk. He rigged a fuse from the supplies left behind, set the charges against a support beam far from where the children were being held. The explosion would bring down part of the tunnel, the part between the guards and the main entrance. They'd be trapped, panicked, distracted. That's when he'd move. He checked his rifle one more time. Full magazine. 1 shot for each guard if he was lucky, more if he wasn't. The sun through the ventilation shaft told him he had maybe an hour left. Time to end this. He lit the fuse. The explosion was louder than he expected. The whole mountain seemed to shudder. Dust billowed through the tunnels, thick and choking. Silas was already moving. He dropped from the ledge onto a pile of old timber rolled, came up with his rifle raised. The guards were stumbling, coughing, one of them shouting about cave-ins. Grace had her eyes squeezed shut. Jake hadn't moved. Silas fired. The first guard went down before he knew what hit him. The second spun toward the sound, raising his pistol, and Silas's second shot caught him in the shoulder. He dropped screaming. Hank Dawson was smarter. He'd grabbed Grace, hauled her up in front of him like a shield, his pistol pressed against her temple. "Drop it, McAllister. Drop it or I splatter her brains across this cave." Silas froze. Grace's eyes were wide, terrified. The gag muffled her screams. "Let her go, Hank. This is between me and Cornelius." "Cornelius ain't here. He's in town making sure your little Will never sees the light of day." Hank's grin was ugly. "You think you're clever? He's burning the church right now. All those children you hid there, all that evidence gone." Silas's blood went cold. Clara, Emmy, Sam, Charlotte. The little ones, all of them in that church. "You're lying." "Am I Cornelius planned this whole thing? Get you out here chasing these 2 while he handles the real problem." Hank pressed the pistol harder against Grace's temple. "Now drop the rifle nice and slow, or I kill her and then I kill that quiet little freak behind me." Silas looked at Grace, at the terror in her eyes, at Jake, who still hadn't moved, who might not even know what was happening around him. He looked at the rifle in his hands, and then he looked at the ceiling. The charges had weakened more than the tunnel behind them. Cracks ran through the rock above Hank's position. Dust sifted down in streams. 1 shot. 1 perfect shot at the right spot. The ceiling would come down. On Hank. On Grace. On Jake. But if he didn't take the shot, they'd all die anyway. And the church would burn. And 9 children would. He couldn't think about that. He couldn't think about anything except the shot. "Last chance, McAllister. Drop it." Silas looked at Grace. Her eyes met his. And in that moment, somehow she understood what he was thinking. She went limp in Hank's grip, dead weight, and Hank had to adjust his hold. Silas fired. Not at Hank. Not at Grace. At the crack in the ceiling directly above them. The rock came down with a roar. Silas was moving before the dust cleared, scrambling across the rubble to where Grace had been standing. His hands found her first alive, coughing, covered in rock dust, but alive. "Jake! Where's Jake?" Grace pointed, coughing too hard to speak. Jake had moved. For the first time since his parents died, he'd moved on his own. He'd thrown himself sideways when the ceiling fell, rolled clear of the debris, and now lay pressed against the far wall, his eyes wide and focused. Hank Dawson was buried under a ton of rock. He wasn't getting up. "We need to go." Silas cut Grace's bonds with his knife, then Jake's. "Can you walk?" Grace nodded shakily. Jake just stared at him. Jake, I need you to walk. Can you do that? The boy opened his mouth. For a moment, nothing came out. Then, yes, one word. The first word Jake Patterson had spoken in 4 months. Grace started crying. Jake, you talked! You talked! Later. Silas grabbed them both, steered them toward the passage he'd come through. The church. Cornelius is at the church. We have to move. They climbed. Through the tunnels up the ventilation shaft out into the fading daylight. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky red. Silas's horse was where he'd left it. He lifted both children onto its back, climbed up behind them. Hold on, this is going to be fast. He kicked the horse into a gallop. The ride to Pine Ridge took an hour, the longest hour of Silas's life. Every minute was another minute Cornelius had to hurt the people Silas had sworn to protect. He pushed the horse harder, faster. As they crested the final hill above town, he saw it. The church was burning. Flames licked up the steeple, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Figures moved in the firelight, people running, shouting, chaos everywhere. Silas's heart stopped. Then he saw them. A cluster of figures near the cemetery surrounded by armed men. Sheriff Cole standing with his pistol raised. Clara beside him. And behind them, huddled together like baby birds in a storm Emmy. Sam, Charlotte, Tommy, Abby, Rosie, Ruth. All 7 of them. Alive. Cornelius Blackwood stood opposite his own pistol trained on the group. A dozen men flanked him. Ranch hands hired guns the deputies Cole had said were on his payroll. Give me the children. Cornelius's voice carried across the cemetery. Give me the children and the will, and this ends peacefully. The will is already registered. Clara's voice was steady. Sheriff Cole filed it this morning. It's public record. You can't touch it. Public record can burn. Everything burns, Mrs. Whitfield, as you're currently witnessing. Then you'll have to burn the territorial capital too, because that's where I sent a copy 3 days ago. Cornelius went still. You're bluffing. Try me. Silas dismounted at the edge of the cemetery, lifted Grace and Jake down. Grace immediately ran toward the group, crying out for Emmy. Grace! Emmy broke from the huddle, ran to meet her sister. They collided in a tangle of arms and tears. Cornelius's head snapped toward the commotion. He saw Silas. His face went white, then red with fury. You were supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint. Silas walked forward, rifle in hand. Your men at the mine weren't as clever as you thought. Hank. Buried under a few tons of rock, same as you're about to be if you don't put that pistol down. Cornelius laughed. It was not a sane sound. You're one man, McAllister. I have a dozen. You have hired hands who get paid by the day. I have people who'll die for each other. Silas stopped 10 feet from Cornelius. You think any of your men care enough about you to take a bullet because these children would take one for me, and I'd take one for every single one of them. Touching, but ultimately irrelevant. Cornelius raised his pistol, aimed it directly at Silas's chest. Behind him, unnoticed in the chaos, Jake Patterson stepped forward. The boy who hadn't spoken in 4 months. The boy who'd watched his mother die. The boy everyone thought was broken beyond repair. He was holding a rock, a big one, jagged, heavy, and he threw it with perfect accuracy at the back of Cornelius Blackwood's head. Cornelius went down like a puppet with cut strings. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Sheriff Cole stepped forward, kicked Cornelius's pistol away, and put his boot on the man's chest. Cornelius Blackwood, you're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, arson, and about a dozen other charges I'll think of by morning. Cornelius groaned, tried to rise. Cole pressed harder. Stay down. I've been waiting 3 years to say this. He looked up at Silas. Nice timing. Had some help. Silas looked at Jake, who stood frozen, staring at what he'd done. Grace reached her brother first, wrapped her arms around him. You saved us. You saved everyone. Jake's face crumpled. And then he was crying ugly, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. The first tears he'd shed since the accident. Emmy gathered them both, held them tight. Charlotte joined her, then Sam, then Tommy, Abby, Rosie, Ruth. 9 children piled together in a tangle of limbs and tears and relief. Clara moved to stand beside Silas. Her eyes were wet. "You did it. We did it." He watched the children watch them hold each other like they'd never let go. "All of us." Behind them, the church collapsed inward with a groan. But beyond it in the east, the first stars were appearing. The fire would burn itself out. The town would rebuild. And 9 children would wake up tomorrow with a future they hadn't had yesterday. Silas felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 7 years beginning to thaw. It felt like hope. The jail cell was too small for a man like Cornelius Blackwood. He sat on the narrow cot with his head in his hands. The silver belt buckle confiscated his fine black coat, streaked with ash and blood. Sheriff Cole locked the door with a satisfying click. "You'll hang for this," Cornelius said without looking up. "I have friends in the territorial government, lawyers, judges. You think a piece of paper filed with a church will stand against? That piece of paper is now registered with the county clerk, the territorial marshal's office, and the Federal Land Commission." Cole pocketed the key. "I sent writers out this morning. By the time your lawyers get involved, the whole territory will know what you did." Cornelius finally raised his head. The cultured mask was gone. Underneath was something desperate cornered. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Name your price." "My price?" Cole leaned against the bars. "My price is watching you swing for what you did to those families. McCready, Chen, Whitfield, Holloway, Patterson. 5 families destroyed so you could get rich off railroad money. You can't prove. We already have." Clara Whitfield stepped into the jail, a folder tucked under her arm. 3 years of evidence, Cornelius. Every document you forged, every witness you paid off, every accident that wasn't an accident. She opened the folder, spread papers across the desk where Cole usually sat. "The McCready barn fire. You paid a man named Joseph Crane to set it. He's willing to testify. Seems he's developed a conscience now that you can't protect him anymore. Crane is a drunk. Nobody will believe." The Chen rock slide. The surveyor's report shows the hillside was stable until someone dug out the support stones. The tool marks match equipment registered to your land office. Cornelius's face went gray. "My husband's mind collapse." Clara's voice hardened. "Marcus checked those support beams every morning. Every single morning. But the night before the accident, someone filed through the bolts the same way someone filed through the bolts on the Holloway wagon." She pulled out the wagon bolt Sheriff Cole had found months ago. Set it on the desk beside a second piece of metal, a support bolt from the Whitfield mine. Same tool marks, same threading pattern, same killer. Cornelius stared at the bolts like they were snakes coiled to strike. "And we found this." Clara held up a pair of surveyor's pliers. "In your land office, hidden in a drawer you probably forgot about. The threading on these pliers matches both bolts exactly." "That's planted evidence. You broke into my office." "Actually, I did." Rose Tanaka stepped through the jail door, the telegraph operator who'd been presumed loyal to Cornelius. "Turns out I wasn't as grateful for your patronage as you thought." Cornelius's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "You cut my telegraph line 3 weeks ago," Rose continued. "Thought you were clever blocking communication with the capital. But you forgot something. I'm Japanese. People underestimate us. They talk freely when they think we're not listening." She smiled without warmth. "I've been listening for 3 years, Mr. Blackwood, and I've heard everything." The jail fell silent. Cornelius looked from Clara to Rose to Sheriff Cole. The weight of his crimes was settling on him like snowfall, soft at first, then crushing. "I want a lawyer," he said finally. "I have a right to. You'll get one." Cole pushed away from the bars. "But I wouldn't count on much help. Judge Whitmore resigned this morning. Seems he decided California was healthier than staying here to answer questions about all those documents he signed. The territorial judge is already on his way. Circuit Court convenes in 2 weeks. Cole moved toward the door. Plenty of time for you to think about all those children you orphaned, all those lives you destroyed. He walked out. Clara and Rose followed. Cornelius sat alone in his cell, surrounded by silence. Outside, the town was beginning to rebuild. The church had burned to its foundation, but the congregation had already started clearing debris. Reverend Stone directed the work from a chair someone had brought him. He'd breathed too much smoke during the fire, and couldn't stand for long, but he refused to leave. "The building can be replaced," he told anyone who asked. "The community cannot." The McAllister cabin had been damaged beyond repair, but the townspeople who'd doubted Silas just days ago now showed up with lumber nails tools. By noon, a work crew of 20 men was raising new walls where the old ones had fallen. Martha Boone organized the women to cook for the workers. Her husband had arrested the man who'd terrorized their town for years. She figured the least she could do was feed the people helping to set things right. Silas worked alongside the volunteers, lifting beams, hammering nails, doing the physical labor that kept his mind from dwelling on everything that had happened. Every few minutes, he'd look over to where the children sat on the hillside watching. 9 small figures, all accounted for. All alive? Emmy sat at the center. Ruth in her lap. Abby pressed against her side. Sam stood guard nearby. He'd refused to sit down since the night before, as if staying alert could prevent any more disasters. Charlotte had taken charge of organizing supplies, her practical mind already planning what they'd need for the weeks ahead. Tommy was helping the work crew, carrying water to the men feeling important. Grace sat with Jake, talking quietly to her brother. He still wasn't speaking much, but he was responding now: nods, single words, the occasional almost smile. Rosie was the only one who seemed unaffected by the trauma. She wandered among the workers, offering help that mostly got in the way, her sunny disposition unchanged. Maybe she was too young to understand what they'd survived, or maybe she understood perfectly and had simply decided to keep living anyway. Around midday, Clara found Silas taking a break near the well. "The children need to know what happens next," she said. "Emmy's been asking. She's trying to plan, but she doesn't have enough information." Silas wiped sweat from his forehead. "What do you think should happen next?" "That's not my decision." "Isn't it?" He looked at her. "The will named both of us. You're their guardian too." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I'm a widow running a general store. I can barely take care of myself some months. 9 children. You came to my door in the middle of the night to warn us. You gathered evidence for 3 years. You rode through a blizzard to help children you barely knew." Silas shook his head. "Don't tell me what you can barely do. Tell me what you want to do." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved to the hillside, to the cluster of small figures watching the work below. "I want them to be safe. I want them to grow up without looking over their shoulders. I want—" Her voice caught. "I want to give them what was taken from me, a family, a future." "Then help me give it to them." Clara met his eyes. "Together. Together." She nodded slowly. Something shifted in her face, a door opening that had been closed for 3 years. "We should tell them. They deserve to know the plan." They climbed the hill together. Emmy saw them coming and stood, Ruth still balanced on her hip. The other children gathered behind her, a defensive formation that had become habit. "Mr. Silas, Mrs. Whitfield." Emmy's voice was formal, careful. "Is something wrong?" "No." Silas stopped a few feet away, giving them space. "Something's right, actually. We need to talk about what comes next." "What comes next?" "You. All of you. Where you're going to live. Who's going to take care of you?" Sam stepped forward. "The will says you're our guardian. Does that mean we stay with you?" "If you want to." "What's the other option?" "The Territorial Orphanage in Helena. A missionary school. Foster families who might take some of you. Silas saw the fear flash across their faces. But I'm not suggesting any of those. I'm asking what you want. The children exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication passed between them, the language of siblings who'd been through hell together. Emmy spoke for all of them. We want to stay together, all 9 of us. That's not negotiable. I figured. What else? We want. She hesitated, then pushed forward. We want to stay here, in Pine Ridge. This is our home. Our parents are buried here. Everything we know is here. Even after what happened. Because of what happened. Emmy's chin lifted. Cornelius tried to drive us out, tried to kill us. If we run, he wins. Even from a jail cell, he wins. Silas looked at Clara. She nodded. Then you stay, he said. All of you. The cabin's being rebuilt, bigger room for everyone. Clara's going to help with the younger ones while I work the ranch. You'll go to school when the new term starts. You'll have chores, responsibilities. It won't be easy. We're not afraid of work, Sam said. I know you're not. But I need to be clear about something. Silas knelt down so he was eye level with the younger children. I'm not your father. I'm not trying to replace your parents. What I am is a man who made a promise to keep you safe. That's what I'm going to do, for as long as you need me. Abby, the 6-year-old who cried too much and had the worst scars, stepped forward. Are you going to use a belt on us? The question hit like a physical blow. Silas heard Clara's sharp intake of breath behind him. No. He kept his voice steady. Never. Not ever. Anybody who lays a hand on any of you answers to me. Understood. Abby nodded, but her eyes were still uncertain. Uncle Cornelius said we needed discipline, said crying was weakness. Uncle Cornelius was wrong about a lot of things. Crying isn't weakness. It's what people do when they feel things, and feeling things is what makes us human. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel however you feel. Sad, happy, scared, angry, all of it. You don't have to hide from me. Abby's face crumpled. She ran forward and threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. Silas caught her, held her, felt her small body shake with the force of emotions she'd been holding back for months. One by one, the others followed. Ruth toddled over, grabbed his leg. Rosie squeezed in beside her. Tommy pretended he wasn't crying, failed, and buried his face against Silas's arm. Charlotte knelt beside them, her hand on Abby's back. Grace pulled Jake along, and Jake, who barely spoke, who barely moved, leaned against Silas's shoulder and let out a breath that sounded like relief. Sam stood apart for a moment, too old for this, too proud. Then Emmy took his hand and pulled him into the circle. He went resistance crumbling, and suddenly all 9 children were pressed together around Silas, like he was the center of their universe. Clara watched with tears streaming down her face. Silas held them all. 9 broken children clinging to a broken man building something new from the wreckage of what was lost. It wasn't a family yet. It was something rougher, rawer, the scaffolding of what a family might become. But it was a start. The trial lasted 3 days. Territorial Judge Harrison Walker presided, brought in from Helena specifically because he had no connections to Cornelius Blackwood or any of his associates. He was a hard man, fair with no patience for theatrics. The evidence was overwhelming. Clara's documents, Rose's testimony about overheard conversations, the matching tool marks on the bolts. Witness after witness came forward, people who'd been afraid to speak while Cornelius was powerful, now eager to unburden themselves. Joseph Crane testified about setting the McCready barn fire. The county surveyor admitted to falsifying reports on Cornelius's orders. The former deputy who'd helped kidnap Grace and Jake turned on his employer in exchange for a lighter sentence. Emmy testified too. She sat in the witness chair, small but unbowed, and told the court exactly what Cornelius had done to her and her siblings. The belt, the root cellar, the starvation, the threats. When she showed the scars on her back, half the courtroom gasped. A woman in the gallery fainted. Cornelius's lawyer tried everything, claimed the evidence was planted. claimed the witnesses were lying, claimed Cornelius was a victim of a conspiracy by people who wanted his land. Nobody believed him. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes, guilty on all counts. Judge Walker pronounced sentence without hesitation. Cornelius Blackwood, you have been found guilty of 5 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud, forgery, kidnapping, arson, and child abuse. The law provides only one appropriate punishment. He looked at Cornelius, who sat stone-faced in the defendant's chair. You will be hanged by the neck until dead. Execution to take place 1 week from today. Cornelius didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't plead. He'd known this was coming from the moment Clara spread those papers on the sheriff's desk. The courtroom erupted, cheering, crying, shouting. 3 years of fear and silence exploding into sound. Silas didn't cheer. He sat in the back row with Clara beside him, watching justice finally arrive. It's over, Clara whispered. Almost. She looked at him. What do you mean? The hanging. I'm not taking the children to watch. They have a right to see him pay. They have a right to move on. Watching a man die won't help them do that. Silas stood, moved toward the door. Come on, let's take them home. The children were waiting outside the courthouse. Reverend Stone had stayed with them during the testimony, keeping the youngest distracted with Bible stories and arithmetic lessons. Emmy saw Silas's face and knew. It's done. It's done. Guilty on everything. Hanging in a week. She nodded slowly. No triumph in her expression. Just a kind of weary relief. What now? Now we go home, build something better than what he tried to destroy. Sam pushed forward. I want to see him hang. No. He killed our parents. He beat us. I know what he did. Silas put his hand on Sam's shoulder. And watching him die won't undo any of it. All it'll do is put another nightmare in your head. You've got enough of those already. It's not fair. He should suffer. He is suffering. Right now in that cell, knowing he lost everything. Knowing a 12-year-old boy and a few pieces of evidence brought down his whole empire. Silas squeezed Sam's shoulder. That's your victory, not watching him kick at the end of a rope. Sam's jaw worked. For a moment, Silas thought he'd argue. Then, fine, but I'm not forgiving him. Ever. Nobody's asking you to. Forgiveness isn't about him anyway, it's about you. Whether you let what he did eat you up, or whether you let it go. Silas released him. That's your choice to make. Not today. Maybe not for years. But someday. Sam didn't answer, but some of the tension left his shoulders. Clara gathered the younger children, counting heads automatically. Everyone's here. Let's go. They walked through town together. Silas, Clara, Reverend Stone, and 9 children in a ragged line. People stopped to watch them pass. Some nodded in respect. Others called out congratulations. A few wept. These were the families who'd lost people to Cornelius's greed. Macready's widow standing in her shop doorway. The Chen children's grandmother who'd traveled from California when she heard about the trial. Marcus Whitfield's brother who'd come to see justice done. Clara stopped to embrace each one. Words weren't necessary. They'd all lost something. They'd all survived. At the edge of town, where the road split toward the McAllister property, Emmy fell into step beside Silas. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For everything. For opening your door. For fighting for us. For... She struggled for words. For treating us like we matter. You do matter. I know that now. She looked at her siblings ahead on the road. Tommy was giving Rosie a piggyback ride. Charlotte was explaining something to Jake, who was actually responding. Grace had Ruth on her hip singing softly. Sam walked point still watchful, still protective, but lighter somehow. Before you, Emmy continued, I thought we were just problems, mouths to feed, things Uncle Cornelius had to deal with until he could get rid of us. Her voice thickened. You made us feel like a family again. You were always a family. You just needed someone to remind you. You did more than remind us. You gave us a future." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "My father chose right. When he named you in that will, he chose right." Silas didn't know what to say. He'd spent 7 years believing he'd failed everyone who mattered, that his hands were only good for shaping metal, not holding lives. These children were teaching him different. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's go home." They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The cabin was nearly finished. The work crew had done wonders: new walls, new roof, new addition that doubled the living space. The barn would take longer to rebuild, but the horses were stabled in town for now. A horseshoe hung above the new door. Silas had forged it himself the morning after the trial. Same design as the one that had hung over his old door, the one he'd made with Martha, back when they'd dreamed of filling their home with children. Different dream now. Same hope. "It's beautiful," Clara said, stopping to look. "It's home." Silas pushed the door open. "Our home. All of us." The children poured inside, exploring the new space with the enthusiasm of puppies discovering a yard. Tommy immediately claimed a spot near the stove. Charlotte started organizing the kitchen. Sam checked the windows, then the door, then the windows again. Emmy stood in the center of the main room, turning slowly, taking it all in. "There's room," she said softly. "Room for everyone." That was the idea. "And we can really stay forever. As long as you want. This is your home now. Yours, your brothers, your sisters. Nothing changes that." Emmy's composure finally broke. She'd been strong for so long, since her parents died, since Cornelius started hurting them, since she'd led 8 children through a blizzard to a stranger's door. She'd held herself together through everything. Now finally she let go. Silas caught her as she fell apart, held her while she sobbed against his chest. Clara joined them, wrapping her arms around Emmy from behind. The other children gathered close, drawn by their sister's tears, offering comfort they'd never been allowed to give before. 9 children and 2 adults tangled together in a cabin that still smelled of fresh lumber and new beginnings. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, warming a home that had been cold for too long. The horseshoe above the door caught the last light of day. Family lived here now. Spring came slowly to Pine Ridge that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass that would turn green soon enough. The creek that ran behind the McAllister property, the McAllister-Holloway-Patterson property, now, as the children insisted on calling it, began to run clear and fast. Silas stood on the porch with his morning coffee, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Behind him, the cabin was chaos. 9 children getting ready for school made more noise than a cavalry charge. "Tommy, give me back my ribbon." "I didn't take your ribbon." "Then why is it in your pocket?" "That's not a ribbon, that's a snake." Screaming, running footsteps. Clara's voice cutting through the pandemonium. "Thomas McAllister, if you brought another snake into this house, so help me. It's not a real snake, it's just a piece of rope. See?" Silas smiled into his coffee. 6 months ago he'd lived in silence. Now he couldn't remember what silence sounded like. He didn't miss it. The door banged open and Emmy emerged. Ruth balanced on her hip. At 14, Emmy had grown into her role as eldest with a fierce competence that sometimes startled Silas. She managed the younger children with an authority that came naturally, but she'd also learned to let go, to let Clara handle the day-to-day crises, to let Silas make the big decisions. "Morning, Pa." The word still caught him off guard. Emmy had started using it a month ago casually, like it was nothing. The younger children had followed her lead. Now all 9 of them called him Pa, and Clara was Ma, and somehow a family had formed around them without anyone officially declaring it. "Morning, sweetheart. School ready?" "Almost. Sam's still sulking because you won't let him skip to help with the calving. He's 12. He needs education more than he needs to pull calves. Try telling him that." "I have, 3 times this week." Emmy shifted Ruth to her other hip. The 3-year-old had filled out considerably since winter regular meals, and safety had transformed her from a sickly waif into a chubby, cheerful toddler who smiled at everything. "He looks up to you," Emmy said. "Wants to be like you. That's why he wants to work the ranch instead of sitting in school. He can be like me by finishing school and then working the ranch. That's the deal." "I know. He'll come around." Emmy looked out at the mountains at the light spreading across the valley. "It's beautiful here. I forget sometimes how beautiful it is. Your parents picked good land. They picked good everything." She glanced at him. "Including you." Silas didn't know what to say to that. He'd gotten better at accepting the children's affection, but compliments still made him uncomfortable. The door opened again, and children poured out. Charlotte first herding Abby and Rosie ahead of her. Grace followed with Jake, who still didn't talk much, but had started drawing pictures that he'd show to anyone who asked. Tommy burst past everyone, the snake still clutched in his hand, laughing as Clara chased him with a wooden spoon. Sam came last, dragging his feet book bag slung over one shoulder like it weighed 100 pounds. "Sam." Silas's voice stopped him. "We'll work the calves together this Saturday, all day. But today, you go to school." Sam's face brightened. "Really? All day?" "All day. I'll show you how to check for breech births, how to help a struggling cow, everything. But only if you pay attention in class this week." "Yes, sir." Sam straightened, suddenly eager. "I'll pay attention. I promise." He jogged to catch up with the others. Silas watched them go, 9 children walking down the road toward town, toward the new schoolhouse that had been built to replace the one that burned with the church. Clara came to stand beside him, slightly out of breath from chasing Tommy. "You're good with them." "I'm making it up as I go." "That's parenting." She slipped her arm through his. "You're good at it." They stood together watching until the children disappeared around the bend in the road. The morning was quiet now, peaceful. Birds sang in the pines. The creek murmured its endless song. "I got a letter yesterday," Clara said, "from the railroad company." Silas tensed. The Northern Pacific had been circling for months, sending representatives making offers. The children's combined inheritance, 280 acres of prime right-of-way land, was worth a fortune. What do they want? Same thing they always want, to buy the easement. They're offering $15,000 now. And I told them what I always tell them. The children will decide when they're of age. Until then, the land stays in trust. Silas relaxed slightly. Good. They won't stop asking. I know, but they won't force the issue either. Not after what happened to Cornelius. Cornelius Blackwood had hanged in March on a cold morning, with frost still on the ground. Silas hadn't attended. Neither had the children. They'd spent that day planting a garden behind the cabin, something alive to mark the end of something dead. The railroad had gotten very cautious after the trial. The extent of Cornelius's crimes and the way the whole town had eventually turned against him had sent a message. Pine Ridge protected its own. Outsiders who tried to take advantage would find themselves facing a united community. The territorial marshal sent another commendation, Clara added. For your help catching Cornelius. They want to give you a medal at some ceremony in Helena. Tell them no. I already did. Figured you'd say that. I didn't do it for medals. I did it for them. He nodded toward the road where the children had gone. Everything I did, every risk I took, it was for them. Clara squeezed his arm. I know. That's why they love you. Love. Another word that still caught him off guard. But it was true. He could see it in their faces, hear it in their voices. 9 children who'd lost everything had found something new to hold on to. Someone new. And somehow, in saving them, he'd saved himself too. We should talk about something, Clara said. What? She pulled away slightly, turned to face him. Her expression was serious. The town's been gossiping. About us. Living in the same house, raising children together. Some people are saying it's improper. Silas had heard the whispers, ignored them. Let them talk. It's affecting the children. Tommy came home last week asking why we weren't married like other parents, said his teacher made a comment. What kind of comment? The kind that suggests we're living in sin. Clara's jaw tightened. I don't care what people think about me. But if it hurts the children, it won't hurt them. We'll make sure of it. How? Silas looked at her. Really looked. Clara Whitfield had lost her husband, her security, her faith in the world. She'd spent 3 years gathering evidence against a murderer, risking everything for justice she wasn't sure would ever come. She'd taken in 9 orphans without hesitation, mothered them fiercely, loved them completely. She was extraordinary. And Silas had been too focused on the children to notice he'd fallen in love with her. Marry me, he said. Clara blinked. What? Marry me. Not because the town's gossiping. Not because it's proper. Because... He struggled for words. Because you're the strongest person I've ever known. Because you make this family whole. Because I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you beside me. Clara stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard, she said finally. I'm not a romantic man. No, you're not. She smiled and it transformed her face. But you're a good man. A kind man. The kind of man I thought died with Marcus. Is that a yes? It's a yes. She stepped close, put her hands on his chest. But I want a real wedding. Church service, whole town invited, the children standing up with us. I want everyone to see that this family is real, legitimate, permanent. Whatever you want. I want you. She kissed him soft and sure. I want this life we're building. I want to grow old watching those children grow up. Then that's what we'll do. They stood together on the porch, holding each other, while the sun climbed higher and the day grew warm. The wedding was in June, when the wildflowers were blooming and the mountains were green with new growth. Reverend Stone officiated, his voice still rough from the smoke damage, but strong enough to carry across the churchyard. The new church wasn't finished yet, so they held the ceremony outside under a canopy of pine branches the children had woven together. Emmy stood as Clara's maid of honor. Sam stood as Silas's best man. The other 7 children, lined up behind them, scrubbed clean and dressed in their finest, beaming with joy. The whole town turned out. Martha Boone sat in the front row crying happy tears. Sheriff Cole stood at the back, keeping watch out of habit. Rose Tanaka had closed the telegraph office for the day, first time in 3 years. Do you, Silas McAllister, take this woman to be your wife? I do. Do you, Clara Whitfield, take this man to be your husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The cheering started before their lips touched. 9 children leading the whole town in celebration. The reception lasted until dark. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else brought a guitar, and dancing broke out in the churchyard. Tommy tried to teach Jake a reel, stepping on his feet repeatedly. Grace sang along with songs she didn't know the words to. Charlotte organized the food table with military precision. Abby and Rosie chased fireflies until they collapsed in giggles. Ruth fell asleep in Emmy's arms and was carried home without waking. Sam danced with Clara, formal and awkward, then asked Emmy to dance because he couldn't let anyone see him being sentimental. Silas danced with every one of his daughters. Even Ruth, who woke up just long enough to wrap her arms around his neck and sway to the music. When the last guest had gone home and the children were in bed, Silas and Clara sat on the porch in the moonlight. Mrs. McAllister, Silas said. Clara laughed. It sounds strange. Good but strange. You'll get used to it. I already am. She leaned against his shoulder. Tell me this is real. Tell me it's not going to disappear. It's real. As real as anything I've ever known. I was afraid, after Marcus died. Afraid I'd never feel safe again. She closed her eyes. But I feel safe now. With you. With them. That's all I ever wanted. To keep you all safe. You've done more than that. You've given us a home. A family. A future. She looked up at him. You've given us everything. Silas pulled her close, breathing in the scent of wildflowers still clinging to her hair. You gave me the same thing, he said. I was dead before you came, just going through the motions waiting to stop. You brought me back to life. The children brought you back. The children started it. You finished it. He kissed the top of her head. I love you, Clara McAllister. I love you too, Silas McAllister. They sat in silence, watching the moon track across the sky, listening to the sounds of 9 children sleeping peacefully inside their home. The years passed the way years do, slowly at first, then all at once. Emmy turned 18 and took over management of the Holloway Patterson Trust. She proved herself a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating with the railroad for an easement that preserved the family's land rights while still providing income. She built a house on the original Holloway property, just a mile down the road from the McAllister cabin. Sam worked the ranch until he was 20, then shocked everyone by announcing he wanted to study law. Someone's got to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else, he said. Silas paid for his education without a single word of protest. Charlotte became a teacher, then the head of the Pine Ridge school system. She never married, claimed she didn't have time, but everyone knew she'd given her heart to those children and had none left for anyone else. Grace married a young minister who came through town on circuit. They had 4 children and moved to California, but they visited every summer. Jake went with them, eventually became an artist whose paintings hung in galleries across the country. He still didn't talk much, but his art spoke volumes. Tommy took over the ranch when Silas's hands got too stiff to work the forge. He married a girl from the neighboring county, had 3 sons, named the first one Silas. Abby grew up to be a nurse, traveling to wherever she was needed, healing hurts the way her own hurts had been healed. She wrote letters home every week without fail. Rosie never lost her sunshine. She stayed in Pine Ridge, ran the general store after Clara retired, knew everyone's name and everyone's story. She was the one who kept the family together, organizing reunions, remembering birthdays, making sure no one ever felt forgotten. Ruth. Little Ruth, who'd nearly died in a flour sack during a blizzard, became a mother of 6. She said she wanted a big family because she knew what it was like to have one. Every one of her children knew the story of how their grandmother had survived. Clara lived to see all of it. She died in her sleep at 72, surrounded by children and grandchildren with Silas holding her hand. Her last words were, "Tell them I love them." He did. Silas lived another 5 years after that, long enough to see great-grandchildren, long enough to tell the story so many times that every child in Pine Ridge knew it by heart. The night he died, Emmy sat beside his bed. She was 53 years old, a grandmother herself, but she still called him Pa. "Are you scared?" she asked. "No." His voice was thin but steady. "I'll see Martha again, and our daughter, and Clara. They're waiting for me. We're not ready to let you go. You don't have to let me go. I'll be right here." He touched her chest over her heart. "Same as your parents. Same as everyone we've lost. Love doesn't die, Emmy. It just changes form. Will you tell them, Mama and Papa? Will you tell them we turned out okay?" "I think they already know. They've been watching." He smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man who'd opened his door on a January night 40 years ago. "They're proud of you. All of you." Emmy bent down and kissed his forehead. "Thank you. For everything. Thank you for knocking." She laughed through her tears. "I almost didn't. I was so scared." "But you did. That's what matters. You did the brave thing when it would have been easier to give up." He closed his eyes. That's what I want you to remember. Not how I died, how you lived. I'll remember, I promise. Good girl, my brave girl. His breathing slowed. Tell them I love them. All of them. Every single one. I will, Pa. I will. The room was quiet. The candle flickered. Outside, snow was falling softly on Pine Ridge. Emmy held his hand until it went still. The funeral was the largest Pine Ridge had ever seen. People came from 3 counties away from California and Montana and places in between. 9 children grown now, with children and grandchildren of their own, stood together at the grave. They'd buried him beside Clara, on the hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read, Silas McAllister, 1841-1923, husband, father, hero. He opened his door. Below it, carved by Jake Patterson himself. Good things can't be rushed, but they're worth fighting for. Emmy spoke at the service. She told the story she'd told 1,000 times, the blizzard, the knock, the giant man who'd taken in 9 frozen children and given them everything. But she ended it differently this time. People ask me sometimes what made him special, what made him the kind of man who'd risk everything for children he didn't know, and I always give the same answer. She looked at her brothers and sisters, at the nieces and nephews and grandchildren, at the town that had become their family. He wasn't special because he had no fear. He was special because he had plenty of fear, and he opened the door anyway. He wasn't special because he knew what to do. He made it up as he went, same as all of us. He wasn't special because he was perfect. He failed plenty, made mistakes, lost his temper, burnt more than a few dinners. Laughter rippled through the crowd. What made him special was simple. When 9 children needed someone to fight for them, he fought. When we needed someone to believe in us, he believed. When we needed a home, he built one. Not because it was easy, not because anyone asked him to, because it was right. She wiped her eyes. Pa used to say that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up day after day for people who need you. It's about opening your door when it would be easier to keep it closed. She looked at the headstone one last time. He opened his door for us, and we became his family. Not because of paperwork or legal documents or the will our father wrote, because he chose us. Every single day, for 40 years, he chose us. That's his legacy. Not the ranch, not the land. Us, all of us. The family he built with love and stubbornness and more patience than any man should have. She turned to face the crowd fully. So here's what I want you to remember. When you're scared, when it's hard, when it would be easier to look away, think about Silas McAllister. Think about a man who heard a knock on the coldest night of the year and chose to open the door. And then go do the same. The funeral ended. The family gathered. Stories were told, tears were shed, and somewhere between the grief and the gratitude, something beautiful emerged. A legacy of love that would outlast them all. The McAllister Ranch still stands today. The cabin has been expanded a dozen times, rebuilt twice, weathered more storms than anyone can count. But the horseshoe above the door is the original. The one Silas forged in 1883. The one that hung over the door when 9 frozen children stumbled out of a blizzard and into a new life. People come from all over to see it, to touch the iron that a broken blacksmith shaped into a symbol of hope. The inscription below it is newer, added by Emmy's great-grandchildren on the 100th anniversary of that January night. Family lives here, not by blood, by choice. Some say if you stand on that porch at midnight when the wind blows cold and the snow falls thick, you can hear them. 9 children's voices laughing, arguing, living. A man's voice deep and gentle calling them home. And a knock on the door that changed everything. Because that's what family is in the end. Not the people you're born to. The people who choose you. The people who open their door when you knock. The people who fight for you even when fighting seems impossible. The people who love you not because they have to, but because they can't imagine doing anything else. Silas McAllister found that family on the coldest night of his life. 9 children frozen and terrified with nothing but each other, and a scrap of hope. He gave them everything, and they gave him everything right back. That's the story. That's the truth. And that's what love looks like when it's strong enough to save you.